Hi everyone and welcome back to Philosophy Insights. In today's video, we'll be discussing the Stop Woke Act. This new law, which amends the Florida Civil Rights Act, has been making waves in the news lately. It essentially makes it illegal for employers to require their employees to attend trainings that promote certain concepts related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. In this debate, we have Christopher Rufo, who advised Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, presenting the pro side, and Zach Weissmueller from Reason arguing the con side.
Yeah, the Stop Woke Act is really the culmination of a long campaign on looking at critical race theory in public institutions. And the Stop Woke Act followed, I believe, 15 or 16 other states and really went a step further. It's a much bolder piece of legislation. And it basically says something very simple. It says teaching that one race is inherently superior to another, teaching that one should feel a sense of shame or inferiority because of your skin color, and a whole other set of kind of what are called divisive concepts are not in line with the values of the state of Florida, not in line with the legislators and the voters and the taxpayers. And we're not going to be promoting those racist ideas through public institutions. You still have a First Amendment right. You can publish a book. You can stand on the street corner. You can go on online. You can say whatever you want, but we're not going to have taxpayers subsidize the idea, for example, that one race is inherently superior to another.
Okay, and that's even
in with one thing because just to be totally accurate about it, it's not just about publicly funded universities. The Stop Woke Act also required or banned private corporations from having certain diversity seminars that had these so-called divisive concepts in them. So it does certainly, take things to the next level. How do you feel about that aspect of the law, Chris?
What Weissmueller is alluding to here is that from a libertarian point of view, the Stop Woke Act raises concerns about the role of the government in the workplace. Mandating what trainings employers can and cannot host could be seen as an infringement on individual freedom and property rights. Here's what Rufo responds.
There is a whole host of speech and behavior that is restricted by the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And presumably this would already be included in that. I think, for example, that if a corporation tells a member of one racial group that he is inherently inferior because of his ancestry, I personally think that is a violation of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Many state attorneys general that I've worked with in the past 2 years agree. And yet corporations were doing it over and over and over. So the design of that section of the law, which is unique to Florida, is that you're essentially strengthening and elucidating and clarifying in legislative text the principles of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and you're applying them in a direct way to solve a direct harm that is being done to employees in the state of Florida and, of course, other places. I've reported on this at length. These are the kind of racial re-education programs that we see in many corporations that try to break people down on the basis of race, try to shame and humiliate people because of their ancestry. So and the Stop Woke Act simply says we're not going to do that anymore.
Okay, so I mean, your broad context for this is that the 1964 Civil Rights Act had effectively already eroded many of the, at that point, more conventional, traditional distinctions between public and private activity. So you're building off of that to say we're going to start applying it to certain kinds of DEI training that we see in private companies. That's right. Can you give me an example of what's one of the statements that corporations was foisting on people to say, okay, you need to feel inferior because you are white?
Sure. You can look at my archive at City Journal or on my website. There's tons of stories that I did on the Fortune 100 companies.
But just what's the paradigmatic example?
Sure. I would say this. So, for example, the Sandia Nuclear Weapons Laboratory, which is a private corporation that contracts with the government to produce our nuclear weapons, took their white male executives on a 3-day white male re-education program. It told them that all white men are racist. It told them that individualism and hard work and the rugged pursuit of excellence is a racist concept perpetuated by white males. It had them apologizing and repeating statements denouncing their white privilege, their male privilege, their heterosexual privilege. And by the end of it, they were writing letters of apology to fictitious women and people of color, simply for the fact of being white men. And
in Florida,
in the state of Florida,
I'm just asking, in Florida,
in the state of Florida, that kind of activity would no longer be permitted.
Okay. Was it being practiced though in Florida?
No, the nuclear weapons laboratory is in New Mexico. It's just an example from different corporations.
Okay.
But look, I mean, we know in Disney, I had another story with Walt Disney Company, their quote unquote anti-racism program. I don't have the details. Again, you can look at the reporting, but it was probably one of the most horrific that was being practiced in the state of Florida. And actually, when I exposed it, the folks at Disney, the executives, were so embarrassed by it because it was so obviously racist and discriminatory and illegal, in my view, even prior to the Stop Woke Act, that they actually nuked the entire program from their internal servers. And so, listen, corporations know that this stuff is wrong. They're bullied into it by DEI consultants. And the Stop Woke Act is very simple. It says, look, if you're going to do business in our state, there are certain guardrails that were established, again, by the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And we're simply codifying and clarifying them and updating them to the new challenges that we see. I think the ultimate point is that in a system that is dominated by the government as a cartel or a monopoly, more choice, more opt-out, more decentralized control is good. I think we agree that ultimately it would be nice to have local school districts that are most responsive to local communities in control of the curriculum. And I think that all of those points are hugely important long-term goals. I think where we disagree, and disagree quite strongly, is in the interim period where you actually have to fight these fights. And my argument is in essence an argument that is democratic, an argument that I think it actually contests the unaccountable state bureaucracy. It's fundamentally liberatory or kind of libertarian in an old sense of the word. That parents, when you get parents that show up at the school district saying, I don't want my kid taught that he's racist because of his skin color. I don't want my kid taught that you know that he might be a pansexual, genderqueer, and has his name changed and his pronouns changed without notifying me. This is inappropriate for the state to be manipulating my child's sexuality. It's inappropriate for the state to be transmitting an inherently racist ideology as gospel truth. And my kind of realist preoccupation is to say we have to deal with the system as it is in the interim, which will be a generational project, and that voters have the right to restrict the state from abusing and manipulating their children and other people's children. And working with the system as it is actually requires us as responsible adults to empower the people who are showing up at school board meetings, empower the 70% of parents who don't want gender ideology in K through 5, empower the parents and the voters who don't want CRT by large margins, in some cases by 40-point margins, to deny them the ability to shape and reform public institutions is actually deeply anti-democratic. It's anti-liberation, it's anti-individual, it's anti-culture. And so we should link arms together in that long-term vision of decentralization and choice and flexibility and freedom. While I would say to my friends in the classical liberal and libertarian spaces, by working against what we're doing in the interim is actually working against those very fundamental structures of the republic and those very fundamental values that we share in common.
Thank you for watching this video, and if you like the content, subscribe to Philosophy Insights.